her dress in white, and that was just glued on. And you can see the blue line across her chest is really part of the postal mailer envelope. The shaman side, the guy, is very colorful, all painted. I painted him maybe 4 times. It took a long time.
And this is watercolor? I'm sorry, watercolor? Watercolor? No.
It's acrylic on paper.
Acrylic on
Yeah. And it might have started with some watercolor, I can't remember. But it sat in my unfinished drawer because I didn't know where to go with it next. A few years later, after, it was about 1999, I think, all of a sudden I know enough about creating space on a stage to say I need bands, horizontal bands, and I need to have a feeling of horizontal plane, a back plane, and a wall plane, you know, and making sure that these bands at least are expressive in some way, indicating that. So, for instance, through the middle there's a dark red line, and that dark red against the green pushes the red back further from the green. So it's not a atmospheric perspective thing. It's just working with 2 colors of different values. The one that's darker, grayer, is going to recede, and the other one will advance. Green is usually a very passive color. Red usually bolder and comes forward. So you learn some little tricks like that. I had done, I think the spots on the floor were done on the first go around. I added this lower section, even darker value, to give it a verticality and put the circles, you know, right at the edge of it. Over here I scraped the paint away. It's the same color as this paint, but it's scraped over this yellow-brown undercolor, so that I'm really creating a different plane, even though this all reads, you know, like the same value with that one color. So another nice trick you can learn, you know, of handling 2D, 3D at the same time. There also are kind of like what I call reverse, these reverse diagonals. They're not receding, you know, on the picture plane, you know, to a infinite point. They're actually going away from the figure. This one indicates almost like it's a shadow of the figure, but there's no shadow here. But it connects up with the figure, and this one connects up with this figure on this side. And so this is at a different angle. Again, having these diagonals makes a more interesting and maybe exciting way of turning the 3D feeling of the planes into a 2D painting. Now, I painted, like I say, this figure several times. I ended up here. I think the last thing I did is I gave them both swords. That's going to make it more drama. And he was mysterious looking. I think he had a black head, but it just wasn't different enough. And so I'm playing with the way the figures are painted. The figure is actually, for the shaman, is a painting pattern. It's not really expressive volume or, you know, stance so much as, you know, just patterns, diagonals, connect, you know, from the sword going up across his chest, around his neck. The arm, you know, of course, is acting as the significant pointing, and almost like a magic power coming out from his arm, and that ink line that comes across the center. So again, an ink line anywhere else isn't anywhere near as interesting or strong as that one line, just because it's near the hand. There's 2 colored triangles up above. I intensified the colors on these, and a triangle has usually one end, you know, that's sharper than the other, like the one on the left. That one is a visual force in basic language of abstraction. This is something that's in Vasily Kandinsky's, you know, basic book, Point and Line to Plane. He talks about all these basic things. What does a horizontal mean? It means a horizon, flat land. A vertical is somebody standing, or a tree, something that we can relate to on the earth. So we unconsciously read into these simple lines things that will tie into the story of what you're making. They also help to enliven the reading of this. So you go back and forth between the two figures and between the figure and the background and the shapes. Next one. I didn't give up my watercolor painting. I'm still doing watercolors. I was even doing representational painting for a while. And in this one, 1989, I started in 89. I think I started the piece and put it away. And that was when they were excavating the Pier Side Pavilion right down on PCH and Main Street. The first big building to go in downtown Huntington Beach. And this was the excavation. On the backside is Duke's Restaurant. And that one sank in the sand and they tore it all down. But at that time, so in this one, I went back 2 more times at different years and did small things to make this a more interesting 2-dimensional abstraction of the landscape that I had painted when I was just like plein air painting. A thing I was doing too was walking around the site. I would pick up odd ends, pieces, scraps of paper. I picked up a cigarette package and found a wonderful color to start the painting. And I put that in the bottom. There's lots of little papers. You can see glued in here, candy wrappers, some black, what do you call that, black paper?
Tar? Is it the tar paper?
The colored paper.
Construction paper?
Construction paper, yes. Yeah. And then I got some dark value paint colors to go, so I have kind of a progression of vertical sizes that construct the wall that goes to the back. There's a plane change going along the PCH backside with the dark oranges and lighter reds. And it goes right into a fence on the far side made up of collage, I think, drugstore printout, receipt papers. And then there's a little bit of, watercolor painting on the trees and such. Now, the interesting thing that I did when I went back is I said I have this bright red square in the bottom section. It's the largest form, and unconsciously we read that as being foreground at the bottom. Anything at the bottom, especially when it's large. So that automatically introduces a feeling of space, to a 3-dimensional space going back, and this over here, the zigzag interlock of the white paper, the light paper, and the wall itself. The wall wasn't really that shape, but I wanted to make sure I got these interlocks to build this shape and make this side different from this side. And that it did have some turns further over, but it was out of sight. But you can play and change with the shapes of things, and it still comes out as reading a 3D as well as 2D. So what I like about this is that it's what I call 50-50, half abstract and half realistic kind of painting or collage painting. So you can see I'm doing one more thing here. I darkened this band of blue over here on the back. The blue is going up here, and I said the sky is so dark I can bring some of the dark down to here and let it fade as it comes forward. And that also gives you a feeling of regression into space, and it ties together the background sky with this bluish part on this one side. This blue relates to this cold blue-green over on the other side. So I'm getting ways of working the abstraction in a 2D dynamic way. Next slide. I did a lot of printmaking too. I took classes in 1990 to 93 at Orange Coast College. Really good teachers, can't think of their names. But, then I got a large printing press from the figure instructor that moved away. Got his press. It's got a nice big bed I can handle. 32-inch paper on there. These are, I did a long series in '96. I took 2 or 3 weeks vacation and just did prints every day, and on my own for the first time on this printing press. And this is one of them. And you know, again, where do you get your ideas? I already had started with using nasturtiums, and I had experimented with this in the printmaking class, and I found that inking the back side of a nasturtium, where all the veins are of the leaf, really brings out quite a bit of richness in texture. So I found I can ink those, actually add multiple colors, and if some of the nasturtiums, you know, will have holes from the bugs eating them, and it makes a very interesting shape that integrates with the background. Every one is a different shape. And then I used string, pieces of string, just clean string, set down over the inked plate and the other pieces of collage, the nasturtium leaves. This is a pot, is a cardboard, what do you call it, thin folder, paper folders cut out, as well as the figure, the torso. And both of these shapes I pulled out from a Matisse work, paintings that he had done. And so that was one of his favorite abstract shapes. He did a number of pieces with that shape, and a number of works with you know, goldfish floating around in such a pot like this. Pieces of lace on the bottom, and a piece of newspaper strip. And then just a lot of like hand mark making. I got a rubber comb to do the scratching of marks, indications of energy flow from the moon to the figure. Lips are made with either a brush with some thinner or with cotton gauze. You can lift off and make these white marks, especially behind. And so you can put these together. You have about 30 to 40 minutes of work time before you have to get the plate into the press. Otherwise, that ink is drying so fast, it won't transfer. It won't all transfer. So I learned to do a lot of pre-arranging, pre-designing, thinking so that I can go as fast as I could to get all these pieces done in 30 to 40 minutes. Next, this is part of my electronics background. I had always had a box of parts. I used to work on televisions and radios, and I was repairing them as a kid. And then I always thought, well, I'm going to get back into this sometime. Start this. It's crazy, but all these circuit boards I had, I just started pulling parts apart, and I said, I'm going to make a robot and make a figure, man versus robot kind of painting. And the figure is very poorly painted, but it has some interesting parts that I wanted to point out. That especially now with artificial intelligence and robots becoming more and more on the horizon, the next 20 years, we're going to see a comparison, you know, of intelligence and capabilities, man versus robot. So it's more timely now than ever. But the two figures in the same kind of pose, where I actually, you know, took a jigsaw and cut the circuit board and cut the little circuits as well to get the shapes. They're very exaggerated, but over here they're just boards that were recessed into this panel. And then I just created a background of turning sort of concentric squares and rectangles, different colors to focus the energy where the two heads are coming together. So it was successful to some degree, and I would certainly make big changes today. A lot of colors are dull and they're not working as bright as they should be. And this yellow doesn't work in the bottom like that. But anyway, I did a number of these and I tried again and again. Most of them I threw away. I have a few left. Next one. After I retired, I got to start at school doing undergraduate classes at Cal State Long Beach. And it's a great program, and I have to say that it is a step up, from all the community classes I ever took. Really are excellent in teaching, and there's a lot of material being thrown out. You have to learn pretty quickly. One of the things I really enjoyed, a summer class, you had to apply Cal State Art School in Florence, Italy. Got to go one summer, 2002. A couple of weeks taking art tours in the morning and doing art classes in the afternoon. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, we actually had an art show in the gallery with announcements in the newspaper. So this is one of my drawings I'd started and finished in school. It has I can't remember what church that is, Santa Croce maybe. We were challenged to do large drawings, figurative drawings, figures with collage. In this case, it was these transparent red papers that kind of indicate some kind of warning messages, as you approach this area. So it's sort of a self-portrait. I never wore a hat like that, but then in the painting classes, I was still doing figurative painting. Got to be pretty good at it. Drawing. This is one of my pieces in one of my favorite instructor, Dominic Quintera, taught there for many years. Really was good at the figure. Really inspiring to see how he worked and can hold a brush and just with touches of paint and mixing on the canvas make a painting come to life. I left all that when I had a class with another instructor who he wanted to see your first self-portrait, and I brought in one that was me painted in blue on a red background, and it was an abstract figurative piece. He rejected it, told me to take it back. You'll paint the way I teach you to paint, representationally, and you'll learn how to use my paints, my colors. And so I did that for a semester, but at that point decided to go into abstract painting for the rest of my career. So when you say you're going to go into abstraction, even though I've been playing with this and doing figurative work, you still have to now go back and relearn what abstraction is. And this is what my second abstract painting I did at Cal State Long Beach in 2004 at the bottom. And it was, again, a circle in a square kind of format. It wasn't quite a square, just something I had. A small piece, about 15 by 17. But it did work in terms of putting together collage. There's it's called taking ink off of a piece of paper and applying it to a smooth surface, like a panel with gesso on it. I can't think of the term now.
Transfer.
And, pardon?
Gesso transfer?
A gesso transfer, thank you, yes. There you go.
I do listen sometimes.
And the only criticism I had from my instructor was that these curves looked a little bit too much like engineering French curves.
Right.
I didn't get playful enough in that. Next one, please. Then, as I say, looking at, again, going back, looking at, go to the LA County Museum. I went to the MOLA over in Long Beach. They had a lot of great paintings over there. Figurative and abstract. I started into approaching kind of a combination of Jasper Johns and Diebenkorn in the top area, where I'm learning to do kind of a two-dimensional setup of a of a scene. My scene is now an ellipse, something in orbit going around a lemon slice, a bunch of other slices of citrus fruit, and you can see there's submerged shapes below or around in a circle around the lemon as well. So I was just, how are the ways that you can simplify and use spaces and make shapes more important. So you can see the lemon has a little lightning around it. The white, comes down to that lemon. That's a key focus point, for this composition. And the warm colors on the left side, it's very abstract, just a two-dimensional pattern, are the colors that I'm using in the fruit as well. And then diagonals and other curves that, again, start to make it interesting. I can't remember where I came up with this broken mark ellipse, but yeah, there's a trick to making ellipses too, by the way. The bottom painting was my second, I think. No, that's the first. The first when I got into climate change kinds of abstraction. And you'll see a few more of this on this subject as we go. This was my first one, and I did a lot of reading in the library. I thought I would do this idea of a recent report made from NASA was about how before ice ages started and stopped, there was a global ocean currents that would start or stop. And so they either were triggering the change of climate to go into a heavy ice age in like 100 years or something like this, rather than 1,000 that it usually took. So I have a wiggly line that permeates and goes through the two hemispheres of the Earth, and these other demarcators of places, just I'm using triangles and shapes because they have more interesting forces involved rather than just a map of a country or a continent. Also, I'm trying to get the colors to work in a luminous way, and you can see, the right side is a little cooler and darker, but it still has a lot of warmth because of the black background, the blues around it. So it still has a glow to it. And of course, the one on the left is even stronger with lighter colors and warmer yellows. So that with those pieces, I got through my candidacy and got into acceptance in school. It wasn't the first time. In fact, first time I applied, I had to apply to, since I had studied figure, I had the classwork to get into the figurative side of grad school, so I did that. And I brought in some of my abstraction figures. They rejected all of them. They liked all my drawings because they were representational. Mm-hmm. So that was back when Cal State Long Beach was pretty strict about having good quality understanding of human form, drawing, painting, representationally. I think it's changed a bit now. So the second year I came back and gave them good quality figures and paintings and made it in 2004. So after 2 more years of working, and a lot of work in trying to do abstraction with global warming themes. And that became my master's show. Next chart. These are 2 works from the show. I had like 12 pieces. You're expected to do a show. It's reviewed by the whole school of professors before you do the show. You get comments to do any changes in the last 2 weeks, and then it's put up at the end of the semester. In this case, I chose painting on wooden panels with mostly acrylic, and it's quick, it's fast, easy to work. It's kind of like watercolor I was familiar with, and There's not much smell, not too toxic, has a lot of good properties. In terms of the abstraction here, I'm showing a global, because that's kind of built into the title. I'm showing a global view on the left. There's a kind of a Antarctica view in the center with some other kind of forms coming out or rotating around it, other islands, etc. There's a red spot, in the Antarctic part, as well as red distributed around, and then there's these long circular paths, broken paths of warm color. So that was my allegory of the interchange from atmosphere to the earth, of heat transfer to the oceans as well. And you can see I can play with this structure as much as I want. I don't have to be true to any particular planet. I put the North Pole over here in the upper right side of the Earth, right next to the South Pole. Just get this nice visual contrast and working between the lightest lights in the sky and in the ground. You can see the repetition of form and coming off to the edges so that even the corners are trying to work as part of the whole. On the other side, it's more of a close-up North Pole view. There's a shape, green shape, that kind of looks like Greenland, done on purpose. Sort of replicated it with a black shape over Siberia. Another black shape, because you can't have just one. So this is this kind of outside, looking at the North Pole region and looking at how do colors and things, these basic shapes move. You can't say if there are these land masses, are they heat flows. The data I was looking at is actually thermal change maps that NASA published in a large book out of their global warming prediction models. And so even though it's based on data recorded and taken over like 20 years all over the Earth, it comes up with color oriented mapping, whether it crosses the border or not, or it's hot, cold. They want just showing you 5 degrees of temperature change, 2 degrees, 1 degree, or even cold. So it made sense to me to show a abstract pattern, and it came out to be an interesting painting. In my critique, the one thing my committee member said, she said she didn't like the blue lines. And I kind of like them, they kind of indicate some kind of affront is happening or something. And I wanted to know why she didn't like them. She said, it looks too much like painter's tape to me. Stuck on there. So I never thought of that association before. I certainly use a lot of it. Maybe that's where I got the idea. The blue stands out from all the other colors, but I could have used something else. Let's see. The next chart. Going back to Cubism, I started studying it again for several years and really got into still life Cubism. Rather than doing my still life with guitar, I tried to broaden it. I'm using guitars, books, other things with the same kind of a concept of a circular sort of table arrangement and a pot of nasturtium flowers, of course. And I made up different backgrounds. Now the background here, starting with a upper left red and then going through the reds in the center over to the right, dividing the white above and the white below and here. This is I saw this in different colors used somewhere by somebody. And I like that way of breaking up the usual thing of a gradated background or a solid background. And so it kind of helps to work the transition from the objects in the center to the outside shapes. So the repetition of these rectangles coming up from the guitar, white, black, gray, light white, gray, and then to the red. That worked really well in reading a sequence, moving through vertically, as well as these more oval shapes that kind of move around. Again, I'm using the same kind of multiple guitar nicks to indicate changes in position and time, and play with the guitar hole. This is something Picasso did, but I tried to invent a few more things that make them different. Where you can fill the hole, you can cut the hole in half, you can make more concentric circles, make wiggly lines. For the flowers, I just put paint dashes. And on the outside, notice all the patterning that is going on. So there's a nice interest, you know, in the richness of the tabletop and the edging. You know, you've seen tables with corrugated edges like this, or a tablecloth, you know, that comes off of this table. It doesn't have it on the top, but it's still kind of there. It changes from values on the left to a dark value, light to dark, as it goes across. So there's a number of ways of abstractly creating movement and getting you from the outside to the inside and getting you around and relating rectangular shapes of paper or books to even guitar nicks. So now we're getting down to looking even at the spaces between them. Notice that the white spaces are all very interesting kinds of shapes as well. So the objects, central objects, almost fill the surface and break up the bottom spaces as well as the top. So it's working very well as, I think, as an abstract. It may be overpainted to some degree. It's a matter of taste, I think, and how much texturing one puts in it. And my friend Maureen now owns this piece. She loved it. She and her husband bought this. He's passed away, but it was one of their favorite pieces. They love jazz. Next piece, next chart. I got into a theme of using a large tree as a symbol of climate change. Rather than work with the globe, I wanted to get back and see if I can work with something like a tree or something to express what's going on, the processes of transformation and change caused over the years by change of weather, getting hotter, heavy storms, and wildfires. So I came up with this theme. This is one small example, a 24 by 24. One tree, but a couple beginner trees on either side, and there's a little bit of sky, you know, that relates and communicates and is transitioning from the sky to the tree. And you can see I'm using very few colors, a couple values of reds. There's an orangey brown color, and then the black, gray, light gray, and white in both the backgrounds and in the tree. Now, and when you have such a small piece in one tree, it's how do you create energy and movement? So again, it's the interlocking and the play and angles that you create. The bottom right tree has this interesting lift, you know, going inside the yin-yang kind of feel. Over here, the triangles of white intersect with the triangles of red. Brush marks, you know, in acrylic, it dries so fast. You got to get your brush marks down very quickly before, if you want any mixing effect. And so all of each of those areas of color, like the gray, I would fill up the thing as fast as I could, maybe 20, 30 seconds, and then get out the next color of gray with the brush and go through and do those marks so I could still get a feeling of mixing of the paint. In some cases, I'd have to go back with the other darker gray, and maybe it got too fat, maybe, you know, things like this, so you have to adjust them. But it's got a nice playfulness, and now I'm getting a good comfortable feel of how much, even though it is very busy, it's still working as a kind of like a giant patterned, plate or something, as well as this idea of a tree. Notice the lines coming down through the tree, that like sap flow or flowing of heat, into the ground, or the ground resources to the tree. Just a simple, again, an abstraction of roots. It's just a zigzag line here. And it works with everything else, because of all of the use of triangles. Next one, please. One more back to summarize this point. I like expressive painting. I love a range of brushes. I haven't been painting much up to this point with larger brushes, and I didn't feel confident to do large paintings yet. I got up to maybe 30 by 30 or 40 by 40. The use of the gesture is very well understood when you go back and look at it the next day. Is it too much? Is it awkward? Does it fit? And you soon learn how your mark making plays out, how much you can afford to put, where to put it to get accents. Also, just slight changes, using as few colors as possible, 3 or 4 colors mostly is what I've been using, and then making tints and tones, adding white, adding a black, or mixing 2 colors together even. Getting hues can make a lot of variety in description and keep it easy to understand and simpler to solve your problem of getting movement. And there's, like I say, texture. Isn't it? I started adding sand sometimes. The sand is a great additive at the very beginning. You can't go back later on. Make a patch of sand that stands out. The collage, make sure that collage doesn't jump off the surface. It's got to be part of it, half buried, painted over on edges in some cases. So you learn some of those little tricks. And there, like I say, so many artists and styles that are painting, and you're always ready to try something new. So I was experimenting quite a bit. I use a notebook. I take my notes preparatory to starting a painting. I basically describe the approach, what colors I'm going to use, and make a small thumb sketch. And that may be developed on a large, 8.5 by 11 sheet too, if I need to look at colors and work that out if I'm uncertain about which way I'm going with this. But that's in my beginning, and I find it very effective for me. It really makes me focused on what it takes to keep abstract simple enough to work and still get interesting. So now I feel very competent in terms of, I got a lot of tools to apply things with, as well as I know how colors mix, how they have different amounts of chroma in each color. Reds are really strong usually. Opaque colors are different than translucent or transparent colors. And being a watercolorist for so many years, I love transparency, and so it becomes a key part of most of the things that I do. Next one. I started on doing instead of at large trees, doing forest, representing climate change happening all over the earth. And my forest, this is like number 2 of the group, and I picked number 2 because I took a picture of it each morning before I started work making changes. And this was a large one, 48 by 48. It had plenty of room, and I made a number of sketches and looked at ovals, some verticals, these patterns of overlap, a lot of things that I learned, from the Cubist painting experience. I put this down, and then the next morning, this is what I saw. I call it stage 2. Stage 1 is my drawing. And you can see that there is a you know a section of black or dark, and it does highlight, of course, all these colors and shapes. And the shapes are connected so that there are single trees or they're a collection of trees, and they sometimes have multiple colors and they multiple trees hiding behind and going to the background and into this sky. So it's got a ground section, kind of planar, still a little bit diagonal. This black form that I'm using to highlight the lower part, and the upper part has highlight by going to light. I think I had overworked it when I looked at it. I said, wow, there's everything has got dabs and dots, and got carried away. And these yellows I'm using, the dark brown at the bottom, very dull, so I needed to do some more work. Next effort, next chart. Eric? Hello?
You got it.
You got it.
Oh, three, here we go. Okay. You can see now that I've made a number of changes, especially in the background. I'm really enlivening the background space with a lot of linear hand marks compared to all of the controlled outlining of shapes, forms, and the verticals of the tree trunks. And the back shapes are very black against that white. It becomes a very strong contrast, and it just detracts in a way of taking your eye off of the rest of the painting, especially the bottom. The bottom doesn't stand up at all. But it gave me an idea of how much texture can I use. I added a couple of drawn trees, skeleton trees in there as well. Added a little bit of line work on the edges, starting to relate to some of the inner line work. So I went to the next chart, please. I intensified the white, took it across, but faded it to some degree, added more color to some of these. You can see that nice blue one on the bottom there. It really lights up against the dull blue-gray behind it. Also, there was a white shape there with a black hexagon or something, another black shape on the middle section of the painting. Those two dark shapes now have little tree trunks added to it, so another texture. And now the center upper trees become the scariest and most energetic part of the painting. So it's like a big transition from the rest of the controlled surfaces and just turns into this explosion that goes into the sky. So it changes the feel of the mood of the painting a little too much. So I had to go on. I also darkened, notice on the left side, darken this, make it work a little more with the blacks. Next chart. Now I went back with more warm colors, calmed things down, took out a lot of the expressive marks, and notice how that one white shape now really stands out, and the transition from background into the trees is working nice. There's flow of the yellows from light to medium colors into the tree shapes, and I lightened the bottom section as well. I think I enriched the large blue background shape and added more pieces to that. Next chart, and here's the finished painting. I added more. You can see a white background, so that there's even more change of white. So now there's a movement, strong movement of background into foreground, going with the whites as well as with the yellows, and kept the blacks simple. Added a few more lines around them to kind of give a transition of that dark shape into the background. And so and some little things happened. One of the funniest interesting lines was this little wiggle down here in the lower right, going towards that lump of grass or whatever it is. It's my favorite piece, but so now I've come up with, I think, a unique style for myself. threw a lot of effort on these first couple pieces that I did, and then I was able to use that to continue making Forrest Warren paintings. And I'm continuing to do that, as you'll see. Okay, let's go to the next chart, and got it to 2017. I decided to go into a more severe kind of style, dramatizing what's happening, mostly because of the newspaper stories and on TV about the fires in California in the forests. We had terrible fires, and 160 million trees burned in 2 years, horrendous. So it was on our minds, and so I started using bigger canvases, bigger brushes, and making more hard-edged geometry abstractions of the trees and what's happening to them as they're, in this climate change environment. What the background is going from a warm yellow and dark yellows and getting lighter towards a very pale, warm background at the bottom. The blacks are almost like silhouettes, and then some of them are turning red, and some of them fade into the colors of the sky as you approach that rectangular symbol. So I put that up there. I struggled for a while to figure out what do I do to communicate this link of the sky, the climate change with the tree. And I like this rectangular symbol. I'm not sure where I saw it, but it worked really well, especially with this branching kind of effect that I've been working with. I should point out too that there's a blue-gray at the bottom right, and there's drips of blue-gray, and there's some gestural triangular marks. You know what those are, of course, from my abstraction days. And some blue over here on the left. So now I'm really including all from warm to cool, and black to white, and having this big red arc become like a dividing line, as well as a falling tree. So this piece, I hope, will be in the show. I turned this and another one in. So did I cover all these things? I wrote down a lot of things what motivated me, but I didn't describe much about the process of making this chart. But I really enjoyed getting into and using this 3.5-inch brush for some of the large marks. That's a lot of paint, and you really learn to put out a lot of paint, pick it up, and prepare to make it these, arm gestures to get it to work. Okay, next chart, please. I did those, how many did I do? Maybe 12 or 14 more. And then this summer, decided I'm going to go back to paper, painting on paper, more colorful work, and change the theme to balance with nature. And that was one series, painted on panels, and then in balance with nature, which are these, and the two examples I brought in are the imbalance with nature. It's a more objective kind of view that says don't talk about the process of transformation and change, but about where we're going, where we need to get to. So it's a more philosophical kind of subject matter and calmer, and I can still use my rectangles, different shapes, triangles to communicate and suggest tree forms as well, and landscapes. This is my #1 piece, and I'm working first with a drawing, and I wanted to lay out more, especially where I took my thumb sketch, where I had darks and lights. The white shapes were very important in terms of a spatial abstract pattern, and that they had to work equally with all of the colored shapes. And the colored shapes, of course, are connected with line going between them. There's vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines. I'm using 3 values of blue, going from blue-black to medium blue and a light blue. And then I also take my watercolor, the other end of the paintbrush, a watercolor brush, and scrape into the wet paint. I added what's called slow dry medium. It gives me about 5 minutes of working time rather than just 30 seconds. So you can go back and choose to where to put the marks, so you have in mind how you're going to repeat certain mark making as you go. And so I work the blues and then work the warm colors around it, and then finally work these green-gray values into it. And they went right over the blue. That worked pretty well. Just by scraping back, I could pull some of the blue. The acrylic really dries hard, whereas the watercolor will, when you wet it with acrylic and scrape it, it'll scrape off all the color and you end up with the white. And that's what I did with the white background. It's actually a light gray white that I put down, and then I would scrape back to the white paper over here on the left side to make my diagonals. And over on the right side, I had this soft green-gray, and I used a brush and made diagonal marks so that it took the shape of the triangle and moved it into this space, light branching, and then I have that continuation of patterning going through here. So it becomes a well-integrated overall design, and then a working of the transparencies to make the marks and the colors mix so well. So even with these few colors, but by working it and setting up the 3 values of blue, some red and orange, just dulled a little bit and layered, it really gave me a very interesting transparent luminosity. So I'm very pleased with that, so I continued. Okay, the next one. I work with both vertical and horizontal formats. Now, in this case, I should have made reference to Richard Diebenkorn, famous California abstract painter, did an Ocean Park series. He really worked giant canvases and really studied Matisse as well, very influenced by Matisse's abstracts. And he showed how important it is to create space, and every element had to relate to one of the edges of the work. In my case, I decided to use forms within the spaces, but minimize contrasts and just create larger spaces. So I've got strong changes of color at the very top, going from the orange and yellow-orange trees to the blue of different values, scraping back in with drawing as well as painting. So I'm bringing white lines or lighter lines, and then creating multicolored left-right variations. So I got warm oranges and reds mostly on the left, and then this going to a blue-green, an altogether different color, one of my favorite colors, taking it down to a yellow-green, and then into the orangey color that becomes this sequence for the lower section. So it's got a bold red line, and the red line and the blue lines, they fade as the blue line fades as it goes to the bottom. The red line stays pretty red. It's still pretty dark at the top, and so there's a feeling of flow, movement, top to bottom, and all of the mark making on the light inner large rectangle was done with the slow dry, with a soft yellow and light white, mixing, going back, scraping, coming back with either white paint or using India ink. India ink has a wonderful way of exploding sometimes, so you got to be pretty careful of how it's used. But I I would dab it and still be fresh enough I could fix it and it wouldn't show. Now, little horizontal marks at the bottom just give you that contrast, you know, with all of the verticality in the piece. Okay, next chart, please. In this one, it's sitting over here. You can see that there's a dominance of the warm colors on the left. A very cold section with 3 kinds of blue, and then a transition small rectangle with green and blue coming over. How do you animate shapes with these gestures of scraping lines? Just something that's so energetic for me. Just enjoy the luminosity it creates in the piece. I had no idea I was going to get these nice whites because it was a watercolor background, but whites came out beautifully, and I worked the upper sections one at a time after I had this whole bottom section completed. I thought, is this balanced? You know, I had a review critique one of my first ones. Maybe it was this one. And I looked at it and it said, it's not balanced. It's too heavy on the right. And I liked the way it was working, and I said, I broke the rule. You're allowed to break the rule. And nobody talked anymore about it, so I guess but there is a little bit of blue-green over here, gray, so it does travel a little bit across, but again, as you're working, you really can't say what's going to work or what's not. And because that blue is a smaller section, and this is larger, there's some kind of a awkward balance to it in play. Okay, next chart, please. And this one, another vertical piece, really went in for medium blue as a dominant background now. So taking a chance, and I knew it's going to be a strong color against color as opposed to light and dark. And I still like those soft yellows and cool yellows that are used with the bright yellows as a way of creating the heat and the light. It has a interesting way of getting from the top to the bottom by that strong diagonal through the center. And it came about, you know, as I was messing with the blue colors and scraping back, repeating the diagonals, going up, going the opposites to the opposite side to counter that strong green diagonal coming down. And then I added a few ink marks at the bottom that bled nicely. You just tip your board up and it runs as long as everything else stays put. And it's got interesting dark shapes at the top. You may wonder, you know, why those work. And they're triangles, of course, but they do heighten the drama and stop your eye, but point back down to the other lower parts of the painting. So it's almost like a silhouette of a shape, and it's a static thing that leads you into the energy and movement of all the other shapes. I think that's what I can say. So, and I've mentioned before that one of my biggest problems was trying to work with space, keep space and hold its size, how important it is to make the rest of the painting work as well. So even though we unconsciously, you know, are satisfied with that balance, when you draw your painting, you say, I'm going to leave it, not work, not add anything up here, complicate it. And so part of this kind of painting and doing it quickly is really relaxing, almost like, you know, Oriental brush painting would be. That you know when to stop before it's finished. And it has this unfinished look, but it still looks together. Okay.
Is the...
I'm sorry, I've got a question. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering whether the border is part of the painting.
What is it building
The
up?
the rest
yes.
edges.
I did take the photograph with I used a red mat board. And so I usually don't photograph that background, but I wanted to put it here because it plays a big part in keeping that blue together.
It holds the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's not part of the painting, the red?
It's not part of the painting, but you
But it
know,
could be.
you can see
Sure.
in these pieces too, I'm using mat board colors that enhance the light or the color around them. Okay, next chart. And this is the second example that I brought in, another vertical piece. In this case, these are all, by the way, half-sheet paintings. If you get a full sheet watercolors, 22.5 by 30, you fold it in two, you get a 15 by 22.5. So that's why they have an elongated edge. I did a few smaller ones, but I really enjoy this long format, both horizontally and vertically. Again, the basic structure depends on the shapes of those little orange triangles at the top. The lines that come down line up with one of the edges, and or the verticals. There's as I was painting this on the bottom part, after I had done the upper part, I touched some green over on the right side over this yellow and gray, and it was still wet, and it just started changing for a few seconds, and it came up with this nice, very transparent color of yellow, gray, and green all at the same time. And so the little green triangle up here at the top left, that was blue, and I was using the blue as a transition color, as well as that form, repetition of the triangle, to move from the upper space into the bottom. But I really liked the green so much that I wanted to change it to green and have a contrast with the green on the other side, even though it's not quite as apparent. It's a very strong green in this case. And it just way at the very top, and it just starts this sequence of very free triangular shapes and quadrilaterals at the bottom in the yellows. So it came together very quickly in a matter of like 2 hours, and it worked fine. Let's see, this one has a green line at the bottom. It doesn't have the mat board in it. So I did have dark colors at the top, light colors at the bottom. So there's lots of solutions to these things, and it still keeps your eye moving. Next chart, please. I had wanted to go back and do a figurative piece. I saw a art review in the LA Times by a woman artist back in the 1950s, Jay DeFeo. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was doing abstract painting. She went to Florence, Italy, and it changed her whole abstract way of painting. The little paintings she just did little paintings for years. And one of them was this rather triangular form with two white dots for heads. And I said, I like that shape. It's mysterious, and I can abstract that and work it in with the same brush handling, paint handling that I have through the rest of my painting in this series. So once I knew that, I was able to work it quickly. The paint was there. I had added the slow dry to it, so I had about 5 minutes. I could go and make all of these edge cuts, you know, with the edge of the brush, and just brought out the forms beautifully. When I put the head in, I added to the India ink. I added a little slow dry to that. I hadn't done that before, and I wet the paper right there, and I had this wonderful little diffusion going on of that black spot that beautifully integrated with the red below it, and did a few more scrapes. But it's got a nice way of flowing and interlocking the design. You can see this diagonal here sets up this one. There's a little bit of one coming right into here that comes up to this part. There's also a bottom line, and you can, in the picture, you can see it's actually the pencil lines are shown, so it's indicating this red line and how it comes into this particular point of the triangle here. So it's coming off this edge. So the figure stands, and it's got these repetitive corner triangles that show the kind of, this is a standalone kind of composition, except for these small ways of interlocking the piece. In terms of the design, and I'm doing in balance with nature, and I put a figure in there, really saying man versus nature. And the figure is in a larger space, which is kind of like where we're at today. So I feel that the balance here is kind of sort of our predicament, that we may lose too much of nature. Species are expected to die. In fact, the what they call the sixth extinction caused by human activity, climate change. So I think the piece is interesting. The two heads also give me a dichotomy of meaning, of ambivalence, I guess is what you'd say. And that's kind of where we're at as well. That we don't have a direction to go yet, a unified world direction, and got a lot of different directions, positive and negative. So I think the figure abstractly is communicating a number of things like this. I really like the colors. Notice that on that blue side over there, I made the intersection with just the watercolor light cerulean blue, and it really gets into the texture of the paper, settles into there and leaves it white. And where the overlap of the front triangle is, I added a little touch of green there, so it gave it that interesting color change that I hadn't played with before. So I continue to invent as I go. The next chart. Well, this is my last chart. Talked about expressive art making, and I went all over the map, I think. But you can see that I'm doing things in an orderly way, that I've relied a lot on my learning structured abstraction from Cubism. And that it really is important that even if they're into this more abstract expressionist, unformed, without form, just complete paintbrush marks, that you can learn a lot, so much by understanding how you can control certain shapes and then let other shapes go free and how they relate. So that's another lesson for the future, I guess, for me. So here I'm making recommendations to us all. Get involved with your painting and continue to learn more. Get to galleries, museums. Keep buying new colors and trying them out. And change mediums. Go to ink. Get back. Mix charcoal in with paint. Amazing, all the different varieties of things. And whatever you play with is what you're going to discover. Until if you don't play, you won't discover. Well, thank you for coming tonight.
Does anybody have any questions for Tom?
Questions, yeah. I told him not to.
Is this, what?
Is it what?
Did you plan this?
The light thing.
The light.
wall.
Oh, yeah.
We should say it was planned because it just suited what I envisioned when I
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Send it
one
in.
over there, we need another one ladder, Candy. Thank you, Tom, that was wonderful.